I'm ready to call the meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission to order. Thank you for your participation and attendance today. We will begin with a roll call, please, to ensure that all of our members are incommunicado with us virtually or in person.
One quick question. Should we do the message first?
Oh, yes. Let's first listen to the message. Thank you. Please listen carefully if you're in the audience to understand the place where you'll have your opportunity for inputs.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and planning department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission's and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the Commission and the Board will be retained by the Secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the Planning Department. The Planning Commission and the Board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning items. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Thank you. Now let's go for a roll call of the commissioners present, please.
Bill Johnson is absent. Fox?
Here.
McKay?
Here.
Green is absent. Jewell?
Here.
Blick?
Here.
Nix?
Here.
Foster?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
Joe Johnson?
Here.
Miles is absent. Hartman? Hartman is absent. Florence?
Here.
Cunningham?
Here.
I show 3 members absent, 11 members present.
4 members absent: Johnson,
Oh.
Green,
Oh,
Miles,
so sorry. Yes,
and Hartman.
that's right. 4. Bill Johnson, Green, Miles, and Hartman.
Okay, thank you. We'll call for approval of the prior MAPC meeting minutes. Could I have a motion? And abstaining will be John McKay and Mr. Florence.
Move for approval.
Oh, there's so many to pick from. Mr. Duell, the first smile I see with a green shirt becomes the motion. A second, please.
I'll second.
Second by
Second.
Cunningham, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next, we'll rock through I would announce that there will be no meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals today because we had no agenda items for that body to consider. So now we'll go through the agenda for today's Planning Commission meeting and see if any of these items could be taken on consent. So I'll be finding out if anyone wants to hear these items. The first is item sub 2020-00054, revised one-step final plat for the Blue Lakes Second Edition. Is there anyone here in the commission who would like to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone in the chamber who would like to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone virtually who would like to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take item 2.1 on consent. The next item is sub 2021-00060, a final plat for the Brush Creek Estates Edition, 135th Street West. Anyone on the commission who would like to hear this item? Seeing none, anyone in council chambers who would like to hear this item? Anyone virtual who would like to hear this item? We'll take item 2.2 on consent. Sub 22-408, one-step final plat for the Nixon Acres Edition, South 151st Street West. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Anyone virtually want to hear this case? Hearing none, we'll take that item on consent.
I move for approval of 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3.
Second.
I have a motion by Joe Johnson, second by Mr. McKay, to approve 3 items. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. We have no public vacation items this meeting. The public hearing items will again go through to see who's present or wants to speak on these cases. The first, conditional use 2022-00003, conditional use of the county for a single plot cemetery. Anybody on the commission who would like to hear this case? Okay, we have one who would like to hear. We will hear that case. Item 4.2, conditional use 2022-00004, permit outdoor shooting and an RV campground in a rural residential area. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to hear this case?
Yes.
Yes, we will hear that case. Community Unit Plan 2022-00004, City Minor Amendment to the Eastgate Shopping Center Community Unit Plan. Does anyone on the commission like to hear that case? Eastgate Shopping Mall. Anyone in the chamber want to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone virtually want to hear this case? Eastgate Shopping Mall. Hearing none, we will take that item on consent. Item 4.4, zoning case 2022-00010, city zone change from office warehouse to 2-family residential near South Hydraulic and 55th Street. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case? I would like to hear this case. We don't have to go through the rest then. Item 4.5, zoning case 2022-00011, city zone change from TF3 to multifamily residential, East 13th Street and Grove. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case?
I do.
Okay.
Somebody.
We will hear that case. Item 4.6, zoning 2022-00013, an amendment to a provision to allow vehicle sales near South Hillside and East 31st Street South. Anyone on the commission want to hear that case? Anyone in chambers wants to hear that case? We will hear that case. All right, folks. We are ready to hear case 4.1.
You want a motion on the consent item?
Yes, that would be a great idea. Thank you. We do have one.
Consent. I would like to move that we approve item 4.3.
Got a motion by Ms. Foster, second by Mr. Nix to approve item 4.3. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Take it away, Bill.
Bill Longnecker, Senior Planner. As the chair has noted, this is conditional use case 2022-00003. This is a conditional use request in the county for a one-plot cemetery on a 20.33 acre farmstead. The applicant is deceased and he wished to be buried on his property. You can see on the zoning map the site itself. As you can see, the zoning around this site is all rural residential, and this is outside of any small cities growth areas. It is in unincorporated Sedgwick County. Could we have the next slide, please? There is the aerial. You can see over on the northeast side of that site, you can see a cluster of buildings that includes the farmstead, as well as accessory structures that are used for farming. The applicant's property has access onto, let me see, 117th, West 117th Street North, which is a sand and gravel Grant Township road, and that in turn intersects with North Broadway, which is a 4-lane arterial, less than a quarter mile from the site. As you can see by the aerial, most of the land around there is agricultural fields. To the northeast of it, you can see a farm accessory building. And then just directly south of it, you can see what is a double-wide trailer set on rural residential property too. Could we have the next slide, please? That shows it's outside of any future growth area, any small cities. It is in unincorporated Sedgwick County. Can we have the next slide, please? There's the entrance to the site. Again, rural residential. You can see the farmstead with the accessory structures for farming. Next slide, please. That is north of the site. That is the accessory farm structure we saw on the aerial to the northeast of the site. This is taken from Broadway, the arterial. Next slide, please. There is the double-wide manufactured home that is just southeast of the site. You can see agricultural fields around it. Next slide, please. That is southeast of the site. That is across Broadway and south of 117th Street North. Next slide, please. That's directly south of the site. You can see bales hay set and ready to be picked up. Next slide, please. That is the abutting west properties. That is a windbreak that was, you can see through onto those agricultural fields. And do we have another slide? Or is that might be it? Oh, we're back to the area. So the conditional use requires the conditional use is required for a cemetery in rural residential zoning. As noted in the staff reports, you have, in rural residential parts of the county, it's not unusual to find small cemeteries located throughout the county, either close to small cities or in some cases appearing to be on private property. What is uncommon about this is that it is for one plot, and that is the property owner himself. He proposes to have the cemetery located in the northeast corner of the site behind the setbacks that for rural residential would be a 25-foot rear setback and a 20-foot interior side yard setback. Staff has not received any calls of this. This was considered by the County Advisement Board number 4 Monday night. Some of the dialogue involved in that hearing were, what if the property is sold? Well, does the conditional use remain in effect? The conditional use doesn't remain in effect. It remains with the property. In regards to property values, if the single plot cemetery remains, in regards to how that's going to impact the property value, if it's sold, that would depend on what the dialogue is between the buyer and the seller. As far as maintenance of the property, that is dependent on the property owner. Where that could get murkier, perhaps, would be if the property is sold and that buyer is not a member of the family, and what obligation he would have to keeping and maintaining that site. Well, because the conditional use stays with the property, the maintenance of that single plot cemetery would be with the current property owner. That, like I said, could be a bit murky. That I don't know if I can answer any better than that. I mean, the conditional use stays with the property. Maintenance of that single plot cemetery would be with the current property owner. That's pretty much the dialogue we've had on this particular site. This was approved unanimously at the CAB 4 district. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Any questions from the bench? Mr.
Bill, I have a hard time figuring out where to begin. With the arrow and maybe the map is up on the screen right now, can you show me, have they picked a location on this lot where the cemetery is going to be?
Yeah, I thought we had a site plan with this. I know you've got with your packet, there was kind of a sketchy site plan, but it's basically going to be, could you plant to the northeast corner there, please? Up there, it's going to be in the northeast corner, and the way that it was described with the site plan was it's going to be behind the setbacks, which would be 25 feet from the rear of the property and 20 feet from the interior side of the property.
And the size of the cemetery is going to be how large?
Just big enough to hold that one plot.
Okay. Obviously, the property owners have responsibility to maintain that. If this were to be sold, they can't separate out the cemetery plot and sell the rest.
No, because one, for rural residential, if you're going to have a piece of property that's going to be occupied, you're going to have to meet certain standards in regards to the size of that property. I mean, this property here is exempt from platting because it's over 20 acres in size, which subdivision regulations allow that to function as unplatted. But we would not, I mean, one of the conditions we could add is that it could not be separated from this property.
Could, at some point in the future, my mind is running, 50 years down the line, because this is a long ways from a town, so I don't, it's gonna be a long, long time before the city you know, would be coming into the area to annex. But if somebody wanted to divide this up into, plant it into half-acre lots, let's say,
Yeah,
all of a sudden, selling a couple lots next to a cemetery might not be advantageous. Would the owners of the property have the right to vacate the cemetery and move?
yes,
President,
they
application to it?
they could physically vacate the cemetery, yes.
There, and the applicant's aware of that. Okay, as long as they can do that, that was kind of one of those things I'm trying to figure out how the rules work when you're dealing with somebody that can't answer back.
Mr. McKay?
Could this be handled with a legal description,
Yes, we
like a
will,
meets and bounds description of the actual area we're talking about?
yes, we will ask for
And in
that.
the deed, put a deed in, on the deed, recognize that on the deed. I'm not saying, rather than say 25 feet from the back part or 15 feet from some other
Understood.
distance, actually require a legal description of the actual piece of ground, rather than the whole great big piece of ground is falling under the conditional use.
Right, we will ask for a meets and bounds description of the actual plot itself.
And that would show as a deed restriction, I guess, on the deed, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
We've got a couple attorneys in the room. Are there any questions that we're not asking that should be asked?
Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor. I would just say that, and I don't think it's in the staff report, I don't think there's certainly not any requirement that the Planning Commission would do, but a condition, if you saw fit, that you could attach, kind of Commissioner McKay, I think what you were asking about, is you could have a condition that they would file a document with the Register of Deeds office with a legal description showing where the cemetery's at, to put future owners on notice as well. I think that would be a reasonable condition you could impose if you saw fit. Thank you.
Okay, anyone virtually have any questions on this case?
I believe the
Applicant?
applicant's agent is online.
Okay. Mr. Stein, are you online?
Yes, I'm present.
Did you hear the discussion about requesting a legal description of the area of the cemetery to ensure future owners would be notified and the exact location would be known?
Yes. And that's
Anything,
just like filing on the deed, correct? Or
Correct.
filing with the,
and you'd be open to that suggestion?
yeah, of course.
Anything you'd like to tell us about this case? Go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
No, I don't believe I have anything to add. Everything that was brought up is reasonable. Future plans, we certainly have considered, things that would happen should we sell the place. Just trying to do what my dad wanted, is really the end of it. And what happens after that, I'm certainly, I know it's a little bit strange, but, it's something we'd really like to do for him.
Once a farmer, always attached to the land, right? We're sorry for your loss.
Yeah, thank you.
Question for the applicant?
Hey, Zach, do you plan on putting a stone up of any kind?
Yes, so I plan to I do plan to put some sort of marker. I also plan to put some sort of metal indicator in the ground at all four corners so that it could be found on metal detectors.
So easy to maintain, for you and for any future owner, I suppose, huh?
Yes.
On a personal note, my condolences to you. Your grandfather was a great friend of mine. I know the land means a lot to you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any other questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Duhol.
I would imagine this is not the first time that somebody in a rural area is requested to be buried on their land. And also, I would assume that this is a private cemetery. This doesn't mean just because it's been designated a cemetery, that anybody could go out there on that land, does it?
It is a one-plot cemetery,
Right,
specifically for this individual's father.
right.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is commission ready to take action on this case?
I'll make a motion.
Oh, is there anyone in the council chambers who would like to speak on this case? Can you guys tell it's my first time doing this all the way through? Sorry for the little glitches. Seeing none, anyone else virtually who would like to speak on this case? All right, hearing none. John?
I'd like to make a motion we approve it, subject to staff comments, with one caveat that we ask for a legal meets and bound description identified and recorded where the actual gravesite will be.
Second?
I have a motion and a second for approval with conditions subject to staff comments. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. Our best to you, Mr. Stein.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Next case we're hearing is item 4.2, conditional use 2022-00004. Philip?
Yes, good afternoon, Planning Commission. Philip Zievenbergen with planning staff. Con 2204 is a conditional use request for two separate uses, one being a recreational vehicle campground and the other is for recreation and entertainment outdoor. The applicant would like to operate a outdoor shooting range. On the map here in front of you, the property located north of the railroad track between the railroad and K-96 highway is where they propose the location of the campground. The remainder of the property south of the railroad track and the highway is where they propose the shooting range to be. They also, the applicant also stated that their primary focus is the development of the shooting range. They look to get that off the ground first. They just decided that if they were going through the process and they needed this process to do the campground as well, that they would go ahead and do that and possibly develop the campground at some other time in the future. This property is located west of Mount Hope. It is on the west side of 295th Street West, as you can see just on the south side of K-96 highway. If you're really strong and can throw a rock, you will hit Reno County about a mile to the west. So we're basically in the very northwest corner of Sedgwick County on the K-96 highway on the way to Hutchinson. The recreational vehicle campground, if it is ever developed, it is the northeast 10 acres. The applicants have been in discussion with the civil engineer, and they said at the point of development that that amount of site could support up to 6 RVs. There would be on-site dumping station that would have to be, properly sited and go through its, permitting and approvals in terms of the on-site wastewater management for a dump station. They would not be allowing tent camping. Staff is recommending in our recommendation for approval that a site plan be submitted to the planning department that indicates where these sites will be and where the dump station will be, just a more involved site plan at the point of, prior to them being able to commence the development of the campground. This may not necessarily be something they do right away, but before they can get the necessary permits and licensing, that they have to have their site plan approved by the planning department. The majority of the discussion this morning, or this afternoon, will be about the firearm shooting range. It's going to be located on the 29 acres south and west of the railroad track and south of K-96. Let's go over to the very first site plan. If you go down several slides. Yes, it's a little bit hard to see, so I'll use my cursor here. They do have an updated site plan in here, but it primarily focuses on the actual, the range portion of it, but I'll talk about this as an overall site. You're gonna have access off of 295th. It has a shared access already there with the cell tower right here on a separate property. We have access into here. They're planning on constructing what they call the lodge. and have the parking area on the eastern portion of the site, and then the remainder of the site will have different stations for the firearm shooting. If you go to the next slide, this is a little bit of a blow up of the western portion of the site. So your lodge and your parking area are over here, and this is just a blow up and a little more updated version of the different shooting stations. You're going to have the 5 stand, which is down in this depression. This area of the site is at least 20 feet lower than the at grade when you drive in. When I was out there taking pictures, even just walking along the railroad tracks, you're seeing the tops of trees. So it is a pretty significant depression in the ground. The 5 stand is kind of like a clay pigeon station where there will be an automated system that will, project the clay pigeon into the air and, participants can shoot. They stated that that is the only type of shooting that will be not oriented downward, because the clay pigeon will go up into the air, and the idea is you shoot it out of the air. But they can calibrate the mechanism to make sure that it doesn't throw it to such a degree that, firearms being pointed too far into the air in a way to help control where the shotgun bullet will go. The pistol training is this area down here. The red on the map indicates different heights of berming that they plan to install as the backstop for the pistol range and the pistol training that will be there. And your final station is over here is the rifle range. They're going to construct a building, and I've got renderings that they provided for me of what this will look like. Up here at grade level, where the stand will be, and then all of your targets will be, again, down in about a 20-foot depression, and that's where the targets will be. So all of the target areas will have earth backdrops that are significant in height to help mitigate ricochets or even just absorb the impact. So most of the shooting on site is either going to be at grade towards the berm with the pistol training, or the high-powered rifles, the one that have the ability to go fairly far, will be downward oriented and shooting against the earth backdrop of like a 20-foot depression into the ground. The Unified Zoning Code has supplementary use regulations regarding outdoor recreation. Street access on an arterial or an expressway has direct access off of 295th, and its access off of K96 is only a quarter mile north, and there is full access to K96 highway at that point. This is an overpass of the highway, but it does go back down to grade level right where 295th Street intersects it. The lighting standards have to be per the code. The noise standards have to be per the code. What's interesting is in the county, there is no restriction on the discharge of firearms, and the county does not have a noise ordinance. And so there's a little bit of a rub of what's permitted in the county versus really standards that were meant for uses in the city. All driveways and parking areas need to be paved. The supplementary use regulation says concrete or asphalt. It's been an accepted practice to match what the pavement is of the access road. 295th Street is gravel, and so being able to pave it to a all-weather surface to the standard of what the access road is has been an acceptable standard in the past. And then the Planning Commission has the ability to establish operating hours for outdoor recreation. The Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, in a sense, is what governs this. In a conversation with their local office in Pratt, I discovered that there's no licensing or permitting for outdoor shooting ranges in Kansas, not through their department. There's a link in the staff report, and I've got some discussion here this morning regarding some of the aspects of it. There's a general accepted practice guidebook that the Department of Wildlife, Tourism, and Parks recommends that these shooting ranges follow. There are no requirements to do. This guidebook is developed by the National Rifle Association, the NRA, and they're just generally accepted practices. And the majority of that guidebook talked about the safety in handling firearms, kind of just like gun safety, as well as the safety in which to develop a site like this. And really there's the major discussion that they had in there regarding noise abatement is just more of what's an accepted level of noise at various property lines for a certain amount of time during the day. So if you jump to, there's like a paragraph image. There we go. So this was taken directly out of this guidebook regarding noise. The public comments that I have heard have really centered around the noise that is going to be generated by this use. So again, this is a recommendation. This is not even required by the state, but it is recommended that, you know, these things be followed. So it goes through here. Number one, an unacceptable level of noise or sound is sound exceeding 90 decibels for an hour out of a 24-hour time frame, or exceeds 85 decibels for 8 hours out of 24, and the receiver is less than a quarter mile from the source. Discretionary, and you're going to see here that they go down to an acceptable level. Discretionary is 80 decibels for 8 hours. Another discretionary in the middle ground is 75. At the property boundary for more than 6 hours out of 24, or a distance, or at the property line if the receiver is over a half mile away. And then an acceptable level is if the receiver does not exceed 65 decibels for more than 8 hours of 24, or activities do not extend into the nighttime hours of 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. So basically saying it would have to cease at 10 p.m. Being an acceptable level of noise. It has a final paragraph there. It says active shooting is to take place during the daytime hours between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. with curtailed but not necessarily discontinued activities during the evening hours of 7 p.m. to 10, and shooting activities should not continue into the nighttime hours of 10 p.m. to 7. So they say it can operate from 7 to 10, but they really say the majority of your activity should be from 7 to 7, and then start to reduce the activity from 7 to 10. So again, these are just guidelines from the NRA regarding acceptable levels of noise, and even guidance as to what acceptable hours of operation should be for uses like this. The surrounding properties, as you saw, are primarily agricultural field. If we go back to the aerial image, there is a dwelling unit within a quarter mile. So mostly agricultural fields, as you can see, as well as the right-of-way for the railroad track and K-96 highway. There's a dwelling unit here that's less than a quarter mile away from the property line, or the very south property line here, knowing that the majority of the shooting action will be over here. This is an outbuilding of a property where the dwelling unit is further south along, I apologize, I don't remember what this cross street is to the south. But those are the two closest dwelling units. This property here is abandoned railroad-related industry buildings, where I'm sure there was some time where it was like something to put grain or other things within the rail line, but it's been abandoned and vacant for some time. The property is unplatted. The section 3 of the subdivision regulations does require this property to be platted because it is a new non-residential use, and it will likely require a building permit, especially for the lodge that they intend to build. The comprehensive plan identifies this area to be in the rural area, and as described as land outside the 2035 growth area of Wichita or any of the small cities, and that it should be developed in accordance with the urban fringe development policy. The urban fringe development policy identifies guidelines pertaining to water and sewer systems, street paving, and drainage. The requested conditional use does not permit any additional dwellings on the subject site, so really the urban fringe development does not apply. It's mostly meant for ex-urban type subdivisions. Staff is recommending approval, subject to the conditions in your staff report, and there's two separate sets of conditions for the vehicle campground, as well as the outdoor vehicle and entertainment for the shooting range. I have heard public comment from surrounding property owners. One of them in particular is here, and I believe they're here today, who have this dwelling unit to the south, again, primarily concerned about noise. The Citizens Advisory Board 3 for County District 3 heard this case, and they approved it, or recommended approval 6-2, subject to staff recommendation. I can walk through pictures of the site. Let's start with those renderings just after that paragraph. This is a rendering that the applicant submitted to me of their proposed, what that lodge would look like. My understanding of the site is that it's going to be a membership type of thing, where people will buy into a membership of the club, and that they will have access to this site, and it's not necessarily just open to the public of they're having a stationed employee waiting for groups to come in and come shoot for the day. Like, it's just going to be, have access to those who buy membership into the club. Next picture. This is a picture of the rifle range stand as well as the 5 stand, and inside the lodge. You can see they're looking at building some decently considerable structures for their shooting stands, and really have a good idea of what they intend this property to look and function as. And we can go into pictures of the site. If you go to the next one. You're just going to see a lot of trees. I was mostly just walking around the railroad track. This is looking north from the railroad track at kind of the very eastern edge of the property up at 295th. You can already see in this picture how the land is starting to dip down and be in a depression. The area for the vehicle campground is actually also inside of a depression. So if you're standing on the railroad track, the land is this on both sides, where at the time that the vehicle campground is developed, those RVs are actually going to be below grade level. So even in terms of a safety factor, like, they're going to be down below grade level, and the shooting activity is going to be pointed at a different direction anyway. Next picture. We'll run through these pretty quickly. The site isn't developed and there's just a lot of trees, so you just kind of keep going. Next picture. This is what I was talking about. I'm at grade level, and you can see these are the tops of mature trees. So you can, that gives you kind of an idea of how much the land does depress as you go inward on the property. Next picture. Next picture. This is the cell tower to the south of the sign. This is the property line between them. You can see the very mature hedgerow that exists. Next picture. This is looking from 295th Street at the site. This would be the main entrance where, like, the parking in the lodge would be. Next picture. This is that abandoned former industrial commercial thing related to the railroad. You can see 295th Street is gravel at the crossing, and right up here where these signs are is the intersection with K96. Next picture. These are the agricultural fields to the southeast. Next picture. And this is, again, that shared driveway going to the cell tower, and then the proximity to the dwelling that is to the south of the property. Next picture. This is just looking around the rail line. This is that overpass of K96. So on this side of the rail line will be the vehicle campground. On this side of the rail line will be the shooting. And then, again, all of the shooting activities would be oriented away from and not towards the highway right-of-way. They're all oriented more south or southwest, away from the highway. Next picture. That might be it. I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for Philip from the commission?
I do. These depressions where they're going to have the shooting done outside, the outdoor shooting ranges, they show on the county as ponds. This even looks wet. Has something been done to make sure that they don't fill up with water again?
I will defer to the applicant on that. I agree. They look like there has been water in them in the past. I didn't go on to the property far enough to know if there is water in them today, but I will defer to the applicant. I'm sure if they want to use them, they will ensure that they don't fill up with water.
It seems to be
right.
There might be a runoff if there's a bunch of lead,
right,
grass. Okay.
Any other questions,
Yeah,
Mr. Nix?
I've got a question for Justin. Is Mount Hope, I guess it's an unincorporated city, is it not?
Mount Hope is incorporated.
Is it incorporated?
This is outside of their urban area of influence, so they don't have a say in this.
How close is Mount Hope to this area? Looks to me like as a crow
About
flies.
a mile to the east. So the next mile road is inside of Mount Hope.
When I looked at it, it looks like less than a mile to me.
Good.
As
To
a crow
furthest
flies.
right.
But Mount Hope has no say in terms of
This is not within their urban area of influence. Their urban area of influence goes to the east.
city of Wichita. I mean, can we put a shooting range like this within a mile of, 3/4 of a mile of the city limits of Wichita?
It all depends on where their urban area influence is. They chose not to include this land. When they set their requested boundaries for their urban area influence, this was not
Okay.
included.
Have we heard anything from the city of Mount Hope?
Not from the city officially, no.
If
Yeah,
I,
Mr.
if I could, I'd like to
Mr.
add to that staff response that Mount Hope would always have the ability to provide comment or to submit a letter outside of the formal process of
Correct.
areas of influence. So they would have the option to submit comments. It's not in the formal area of influence for them.
Mr. Hartman?
Those state standards on decibel levels, are those measured at the source of the noise, or would it be, you know, if the nearest person that might be affected by it was a quarter of a mile away? Where does that standard measured from?
I will just defer to what it says in the standard on the screen. For example, that first one says, under the unacceptable, it says, 85 decibels for 8 hours out of 24, and the receiver is less than a quarter mile away from the source. So it didn't necessarily specify, some of them specify being at the property line, some of them specify a certain distance from the source. I think it kind of varied based on, some of them related to, well, the decibel level can be this high for this amount of time, but it has to be lower if it's a longer period of time, or it can be an acceptable higher decibel for a shorter period of time, but it has to be a lower decibel level if it's heard at this distance away from the source. So it kind of depended on the decibel level, and again, these aren't requirements. This is just general accepted practice by the NRA that the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism has adopted as just good ways to develop it. They do not require adherence to this.
Mr. Wadle, do you have a comment?
Well, it's to follow up on an earlier question. This property, the eastern boundary of this property is approximately a half a mile from Mount Hope's city limits.
Okay.
Mr. Warren?
And some of this may need to wait for the applicant, but Philip, you and I talked the other day on the phone. One of the paragraphs in your staff report says that sports shooting ranges are governed by the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, which has adopted safety practices established by the National Rifle Association. KDWPT does not require any licensing or permitting, nor are they required to follow the adapted safety practice. Such practices can be reviewed, and then you gave a link on how they can do that. Staff recommends that the applicant adhere to the recommended safety practices by the KDWPT. So if we were to approve this and we adhere to that recommendation, then that becomes a requirement, roadmap, that they follow those regulations.
It's a recommendation to back up the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism's recommendation. So we're basically backing up the Kansas Department to say they recommend you follow this, and we recommend that you follow this.
Is there any teeth in that?
I don't know how I guess that's really for Justin to potentially opine on regarding, could we require them to adhere to the NRA, or can we just recommend?
I guess my next question is who, we're going to recommend something with firearms. My concern is safety. I'm not worried about noise, because if you were worried about noise, you wouldn't be that close to a railroad track. So there's going to be more than enough noise going on from that standpoint. But I'm concerned about safety. This looks like a great location for a fire range with the terrain. Can we require, like the sheriff department, they've got a firing range that they practice at. They've got safety rules. Do we have somebody from our sheriff's department that could go out and oversee these setups to make sure that we're creating a safety issue?
Well, let me kind of answer the question or two you asked Philip, and then I'll get to that question next, Commissioner Warren. First, the way the staff report, as I understand it, as Philip was saying, is it was more not a formal recommendation as part of any approval, because it's not on the next page. If you look on page 4 of this item, the standards noted by the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism are not part of that staff recommendation. So it's not a formal recommendation. The second thing that I think you were kind of getting to perhaps is it would probably be a challenge for the county to enforce some of the requirements, like on decibel readings. We don't have decibel equipment to do those ratings. We don't necessarily, our staff doesn't usually do that. You asked about the sheriff's office, and you're right, they do have a shooting range out at Lake Afton, things along those lines. They're not really, they don't go and inspect berms and things like that around the unincorporated area, so that wouldn't really fit into what they normally do. It's not to say that Sheriff Easter wouldn't be, willing to have somebody go out and take a look and make suggestions on it, but I don't know if it could be part of any real formal recommendation from the Planning Commission. Did you have any other questions on that?
Those were the main ones.
Okay, thank you.
You had a question, Mr. Nix?
Well, I don't want to take exception with one of my colleagues here, but I think noise is an issue. I think the difference between having a railroad track and a shooting range, there isn't anybody here that has any more guns than I do, but I'm just saying there's a difference between those two things. In paragraph 3, we talk about, it says the existing mature hedgerow along the property lines, the recommended conditions of approval should mitigate possible negative impacts. I don't know who wrote that, but I doubt that that's right. I doubt the hedgerow is going to have anything to do when a shotgun goes off or a rifle. If anything, in my experience, it got more of an echo happening when that happens. So I'm not sure I agree with that. As far as the depression and noise, Chuck, it's not going to be any less noise if you're 25 feet down in an area that was dug out to build up 96 highway than if you're on a level ground. So from a safety standpoint, I don't have a problem with the safety issue of it. We're far enough away. I just wonder if the people living around it and the people in Mount Hope have an issue with it. And the hours of operations would certainly be an issue for me, I think. Yeah.
Cunningham?
Down in Mulvane and Derby, they had a bunch of problems with private firing ranges, and I think there was some ordinance changing about to happen about the size and height of berms and what the berms are, what the backstops are made of. Does that have any bearing on this at all?
Commissioner Justin Wagoner, Assistant County Counselor again. The Board of County Commissioners did adopt a resolution, and what the resolution does, it doesn't specify anything with regard to how berms are supposed to be set up. There was a little bit of discussion about that possibly, but they ended up passing a resolution that makes it a violation of county code if someone shoots a firearm and the bullet goes off of the property onto somebody else's property with limited exceptions. That's a violation of the county code and can be up to a $500 fine. Something very similar passed in front of Johnson County because they had issues with bullets going onto their properties, much like the Derby matter you're referring to. So that's the individual who shoots the gun. It wouldn't be the property owner who'd be responsible or the business. It'd be the individual shooting the gun who could be subject to the charge if their bullets are going off property.
That's county-wide, so it would apply to this property.
That's correct. It would apply in the entire unincorporated area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission at this point?
I have one more.
Go ahead.
The shooting ranges that are that were on the slide with the red lines, are they going to be shooting east and west or north and south?
Let's pull it up. I can defer to the applicant on that regarding the direction of the berms and which way they intend them to fire. I will say to the point of the site plan, if this is approved, we will require like a 2-scale site plan, much cleaner version where there's a lot more clarity as to what it is, and then it would be developed to that, to what is shown on the site plan.
In the slides that show the adjacent property, can you show us where the cows graze when the weather's
You go back to the aerial. My understanding from that public comment from the individuals concerned about the cows was that he owned the property to the west and that this was the area that he occasionally grazes his cattle.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Otherwise, we'll ask the applicant. I see you online, I believe. If you would state your name and address, please, for the record. and then you'll have 10 minutes to tell us about your request.
Tyler Graves, along with John Crafels here. We live in Hutchinson, 300 East 15th, there in Hutchinson. Obviously, a pretty good amount of questions are involved in this. We did some sound testing, mainly after we got the email from the bar shard there to the east of the property. We did testing from where those red lines were drawn. The shooting was there, and then also up on more towards the east where our rifle bays are going to be, shooting down into that depression there. The shooting could be heard obviously at that property line, but it did not exceed the ambient noise coming from the highway. The ambient noise was hovered right around 65 at the eastern edge of the property. And obviously when a semi would come by, it would shoot up to about 80. The gunshot never exceeded the 65 at that property line. Obviously a gunshot is louder than that, but at the point of origin. But the other thing so we tested four different options. We did a rifle, unsuppressed. We did a suppressed rifle, a shotgun, and a pistol, all with your kind of normal full metal jacket ammo. And like I said, none of them exceeded them. The other part where we did the sound test was from the same 2 points where we were shooting. And then if you could go back to the map that has the red lines on it, I could show you. So right where the red dot or the red square where it says 8 to 10, pretty much right above the 10, Mr. Heffling wasn't available that evening, so we stood on the north side of that hedgerow. We wanted to do it on his property, but we didn't want to go on there without his permission. So, so again, we shot from where the red lines are and then up where the rifle stands are. The ambient noise down there was about 60, right above that 10 on the north side of that hedgerow. And all the firearms except the suppressed rifle pushed that up to about 65. The highest reading we got was about an 82, and that was a bird chirping right above the meter when we were standing there. We did get a reading on a train, not at this location. We were actually on our way home, and it was that same rail line, and we pulled over and took a decibel reading of the train, and it was 105 at the horn. So I do got to agree with the member that said that, obviously a train is substantially louder at the property line because it is at grade along with there. We do plan, you can kind of see in this drawing along the railroad, that yellow highlighter. We do plan to add a pretty good amount of trees there to help with that sound. Obviously the neighbor to the south there would benefit from that also. Then as far as the safety aspect of it goes, the NRA is kind of what we're referring to for all of our safety, parameters, and they call for 8 to 12 foot berms. So those red lines will be within that 8 to 12 foot berms, except for the south line and the east line. Like Philip mentioned, those are at least 20 feet. And those are going to be that south line is going to be the backstop. And like we said before, that'll be at least 20 feet. As for the safety of that cattle, I mean, there's no shooting that way. There's already resolutions about, bullets leaving the land. If we could have better pictures of that bunch of trees over on the far west side, you'd really see that, it's very unlikely that a bullet would ever even get through it. There is a substantial amount of trees down there. So I don't foresee there being any, and again, obviously this is a private membership, and if a situation like that occurs, it would be removal of that member from the membership rolls. But we do plan to have shooting hours. Those shooting hours will obviously change with daylight savings, but there won't be shooting at any dark. And the time that we're kind of referring to the Central Kansas Gun Club in Hutchinson, Kansas, what they're doing is usually between 8:30 and 9, depending on the time of the year, is when shooting is allowed to start. And then it shuts down about 30 minutes before dark. So
I've spoken to
kind of
the
concludes
shooting range. Do you want to speak a little to the RV park as well?
Yeah, the RV park, that wasn't in our initial plans. The only reason it did is because this land that we purchased, you know, the land was very appealing because it was important to us to be good neighbors. You know, John actually lives fairly close to a range too, and it's important, you know, that range was very open with the public, and that's kind of what we want to be too. So when this land came up for auction, it was very appealing to us because we could be a good neighbor and still do what we wanted to do. But there was nothing really good to do on that triangle up there, that northern triangle where we're asking for the RV park. So it's something that just, hey, we could offer this also. And it obviously, any of the permitting and things like that will be with, you know, we're not going to do anything unsafe there because obviously it's going to be needed to be permitted in order to happen. So we plan on just doing a little pond there. You can kind of see where there's already it looks like there's standing water in that map right there on the far right edge. But somebody had mentioned that about water. None of this holds water. During the auction, there was some down in the big part, but it's empty now. I think we're supposed to get some rain in the next couple of days. I'm sure it'll fill up, but it eventually all drains out. So there are some sand points at some point in that, or somewhere in that land.
So can I ask, if there is water, is that going to interfere with people shooting, or you basically just shoot across the water if there's standing water in the bottom of the depressions?
So we're actually part of this dirt work. We haven't got real far with a civil engineer yet, but part of the dirt work will be to manage the water into, you can kind of see, it's like a little loop right above where the red lines are. It goes to the right and it loops back. We're gonna do our dirt work in a way that it pushes the water there. That way, you know, the only thing we have to do is get a vehicle over it if somebody's going down to these red lines, the pistol bays. So no, we don't foresee. Obviously, it's draining already, and if we can get it to a point where it'll drain faster, we'll definitely do that. But don't see any issues as far as water goes. As we're hopeful that a civil engineer will address that for us.
Other questions for the applicant from the commission? Do we, go ahead. I don't know what I heard. Is there anybody in council chambers who would like to speak to this case? Okay, you want to come forward, please? State your name and address, and you will have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Jack Heffling, adjacent owner to the ground of this property.
And your address, sir?
10255 North, 295th Street West, Mount Hope.
Thank you.
And I've looking through this, this is updated compared to what I got earlier. So there's a lot of questions been answered. But I'm going down this list, and there are concerns, and groundwater contamination is one of the first. There's no water in the hole, like you said, because it seeps. It won't hold water. And there's trouble with groundwater and lead. You have a contamination problem, and that has to be addressed. Noise pollution, too. I heard a train 2 miles from where I was when I left my house, 2 miles down the road, and I could hear that train whistle. And it's, 140 decibel horn, but I could hear it at my place too, 2 miles away. And you sit there and hit that horn every day, all day. How would you like to listen to that? And I'm not in favor of it. Traffic, I don't know, it's gonna increase traffic. Alcohol, drug use, who's controlling it? It will happen. Public or private use, I found out it's membership. Is there security on board, in-house? Are they there all the time? I don't know. What's the number of memberships allowed? The time is taken care of. The size of arms, I don't know what size caliber they were shooting. I didn't hear anything that night. I was home. And it's like shooting throw a firecracker in a barrel. It's magnified. So it's louder than if you're out there on the flat plains and shooting. Trash, that's been addressed. Safety, that's one of the important ones. The RV park, they're kind of tabled for now, but once you get in here, that's going to be an issue down the road. I guess to summarize, there's an RC and Recovery Act, the RCRA, regarding hazardous waste, which is what lead is, and how it's contained, captured, and dealt with. So the gun range would be a generator of hazardous waste. I'd like to see a business plan, a long plan, and short and long-term. Clean Water Act is also another one. I dealt with that firsthand, having a fire or a filling station years back, and they can be pretty strict about that.
Your time is up. Can you summarize in the next 15 or 20 seconds?
I'll try. Erosion control, unwanted restricted traffic or restricted traffic. Township requirements, what's this going to do to the road in the township? They're going to have extra maintenance. Restriction of farm equipment on the road, trucks, tractors, combines, etc. Safety on the guns. Are the people educated? Do they know how to handle? Who can go in? What do you got to have? What's the requirements to get in this? Tornado shelters, restrooms. What's the response time of law enforcement? There is a school close by. Vandalism's another, and so that kind of summarizes it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the chamber who'd like to present, please? Hello again, state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Audrey Heffling. I live at 10255 North, 295th Street West. I'm Jack's wife. We live, as he said, on the adjacent property. I'm going to read my statement because I feel like I won't birdwalk if I do that, so I apologize for not looking at you, but this will be best. My concerns are based on the information that was provided to us regarding the intended use. First of all, I'd like to address the gun range. A few weeks ago, I was working outside, and there was persistent gunfire coming from that property. I could hear not only the pop of the initial fire, but also the whizzing reverberation. I don't know what that's called, but that's what I was able to hear. It was very scary to me, and I went back inside my house, but I could still hear it through the walls of the house. But at least I felt like there was some protection there. I could hear where the sound was located, but I had no idea what direction they were shooting. So if they're not shooting towards the highway, they're shooting towards me. If they're shooting east and west, they're shooting either towards Mount Hope, they're shooting toward Barchers, where they keep their cattle. I could never subject my children or grandchildren to the fear if they were working on the farm with us. They come out there, they help us with our livestock, they help us, the little ones come and gather eggs. They do all kinds of things, and I can't subject them to that. In addition, I want to share with you that I've taught for Wichita Public Schools since 1991. In recent years, the district has implemented something called Run, Hide, Fight. If you haven't seen that, I suggest that you look at YouTube and just look up Wichita Public Schools Run, Hide, Fight. It's a safety protocol for students and staff in the event of a shooter. I also would say, in regards to this, that there's a second one that I would suggest that you watch, and it is called Back to School Essentials, Sandy Hook Promise. I really encourage you to please watch these on YouTube. If you have children or grandchildren, this will give you a perspective. With that in mind, I never want them to, my children, my grandchildren, or youth of any of the area families, to get used to the sound of gunfire and persistent gunfire and feel like it's okay to continue in the field or working with the animals or playing in the yard. I don't want it to be a commonplace sound that they hear and they train themselves to ignore because they hear it so frequently. There's a school that's a little over a half mile away. It's actually, we measured it with the internet, it was 0.697 mile away. And I've lost.
And your time is up, so if you could wrap up, do you think another minute is enough?
I'll try. I know that they can hear the gunfire from the school because we can hear fireworks that are set off on the playground there. This is very concerning to me. And also, I'm a little bit worried, and I think that these gentlemen, they're from Reno County. I'm sure they have very good intentions. I'm sure that they will no doubt do the best that they can for this property. But Reno County just suffered a huge fire loss. This property is surrounded. Our wheat field generally is right to the south of that. There's wheat planted where Barchers put their cattle. There's wheat across the road at the Dick Farm. And there's also wheat where Orrin Winter had across the highway. If you don't understand what a campfire would do, surrounded by 4 fields of wheat, then maybe, I hope that you'll consider that as well. So I'm sorry, I can't finish sharing all of this with you, but I hope that you will think of these things. What this 3 minutes will impact your decision, is going to impact the rest of our lives.
Thanks for your testimony. Next.
Hi.
Hi. Your name and address for the record, please, and then you have 3 minutes.
My name is Mary Dick, and my address is 29,800 West 101st Street North, Mount Hope. And I thank you for hearing what I've got to say. It's not much, but my property wasn't mentioned in any of your maps or pictures or anything, and it butts Jack's property. It's a homestead that was homesteaded in 1871, and so I live out there too. I'm against rezoning it. It was a residential area. My parents, my grandparents lost the ground that they're talking about to the state of Kansas to put that highway in, and the holes were dug so they could have dirt to build that highway. Then this gentleman bought this ground, and then they sold it to somebody else. The water has never been held in the ground. There's never been water held in that ground. And the noise from the motorcycles, the guns, and everything else that goes on out there, you can hear it in my house too, just like Jack can hear it in his. And I also have children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that come to my house, and therefore I hate to see it happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in the council chambers? Come forward, thank you.
I'm Orrin Winter, address 25930 West 77th Street North, Mount Hope. I don't live that close, but I farm adjacent to it. I've known the property forever. There's not much more that I can say that hasn't been said, but I'm concerned about the shooting. I guess what rings in my mind, some of you guys are familiar with the Hooray Ranch. It's out in the middle of nowhere where it should be. The thing that rings in my mind, you got a bunch of drunk town clowns coming out there shooting guns. I mean, really. The other thing, they probably come from Reno County, maybe that's where they need to stay. But I just talked to City Commissioner Mount Hope. I don't think the city of Mount Hope has any idea this is going on. I think they would have some concerns. But sounds maybe good on the beginning of it, but once you give this permit, it's kind of anything goes. That once it's permitted, that it's kind of out of our control. So naturally, I'm here to protest it. That you talk about the railroad noise. The railroad is commerce, it comes and it goes. The shooting will be constant. That we're also in the very corner of the county. I don't think we're going to get any sheriff protection or any enforcement out there that say, once permit is approved, it's going to be anything goes. I have to laugh. We're talking about what the game commissioner calls generally accepted practices. Well, that sounds good, but again, there's no enforcement. So, like I say, I've lived around their lifetime. We farmed around there for a lifetime. The RV park concerns me. The groundwater contamination concerns me. That I guess I don't approve. That ground's been there forever. We thought it was waste ground. That's fine. And now to come and develop it like this, nobody had any idea. So I guess I'm here to protest. I'm not in favor of it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone virtually who would like to speak to this case? Then we'll ask the applicant, please, for their response to the concerns expressed, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay. I just want to obviously again reiterate that, you know, it is important for us to be good neighbors. That's why we've taken the safety measures that we have. The guidelines that are around outdoor ranges suggest an 8 to 12 foot berm, and our berm is going to be 25 feet tall with shooting down into it. So the likelihood of a stray bullet is nil. As far as the noise, we did obviously do our test to make sure that it didn't exceed ambient noises with the railroad and the highway there. It didn't. So obviously a gunshot can be heard, you know, and that's something we want to respond to and be a good neighbor with. But with the county not having a noise ordinance or anything like that, I guess it's something that we've taken upon ourselves to be a good neighbor. As far as the groundwater contamination goes, I think her name was Mary. She's obviously grew up on the land, lived there, still lives out there. She said there's no standing water. That being said, the EPA and the NRA both suggest that the berms be cleaned every 1 to 5 years for lead. There are companies out there that come and do this. In our business plan, we suggest that we're going to do this every 3 years. It's something that we want to take care of. If there is flooding and things like that, there won't be any shooting over the water based on where we're going to have our retention and sand points. And then, I guess as far as the fire issue, I'd love to respond to it, but obviously there, you know, I don't know that there's a way to. Obviously a campsite might have grills and things like that, but there won't be any campfires or anything like that allowed on, you know, by the RVs. So I think a motorist on K96 throwing out a cigarette is far more likely than a fire being created on our land. But
your 2 minutes is up. Is there anything specifically you still want to add?
I don't believe so, no. Thank you.
Any questions from the commission at this point? One question. Go ahead, Ms. Cunningham.
The NRA guidelines, do they ever change, or are we going to make it as written now? Or clubs and associations, they all. Oh, can you not hear me? The NRA guidelines, I think they need to be as stated as written today, because they could change.
Philip, do you have a?
No, I was just coming
comment?
up to see if there was
Okay.
something I could address. That's up for you guys to decide.
All right, Commissioner, are you ready to enter some? Scott?
Yes, this is Scott Wadle from the Planning Department. In response to the comments and some of the dialogue that had gone on about groundwater, I made a quick phone call to the county's expert on that, which is the environmental staff person, and she indicated that she would be willing to look at it. We had not reached out to her ahead of time, but that we talked a little bit about the situation just in a few seconds here. She said it would take a little bit more time to look into it. I intend to get staff to get with her to get some information, but in the meantime, I guess it's going to take some time to produce that. If you think that would be helpful, we can produce that if you wish to defer it, or if you wish to take action on this, we will produce that information before the BOCC meeting.
Okay. I did have one question for the applicant. When you tested the decibels, that was with a couple of guns shooting at a time, where there could be multiple people. How do you factor in the number of guns that might be going off at the same time? I live next to a place that's heavily hunted, and it's a lot different. There's 2 people out there or 25. So
Sure. So we did repetitive shooting, very fast shooting, to obviously try to mimic multiple shooters. It did, obviously the sound of where it was, it didn't generate any more noise, or any louder noise, I should say.
And did you test in the depressions to see if that echo effect increased the noise?
Our main concern was the noise that would be generated towards the property line of the Hefflings as well as Barchard. So we didn't test down in the hole. We just wanted to hear the noise exiting the property, which, like I said, there along the west with the Barchards, it didn't exceed the highway noise. Along Jack's property, we did it on the north side of the hedge line. So, and again, that noise test was with no vegetation out there. That was 2 weeks ago. So once you get leaves on the trees and things like that, it's only going to get better. So.
And may I comment?
Yes, Ms. Foster.
I took one acoustics course, and it was a long time ago, but honestly, the idea of shooting something into a barrel and hearing it echo, yes, that makes sense because you're standing over the barrel. If anything, these depressions are going to guide the sound waves up. It's going to reduce the sound moving laterally, just
Absolutely.
for what that's worth.
Okay. Any other questions? The first question maybe we can ask is, would more additional information about stormwater be helpful to the commission in making a decision, or are we ready to make a recommendation? You want to make a motion to that effect? Would that be the correct way, Scott?
I would suggest that you've got to take action on it one way or the other. So if you defer it, you've got to take action on it, or any other action.
So would you like to make a motion to defer?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that
to allow more information on the stormwater.
Just for
Or
the
the-
record, the next meeting is April 7th. We
April
have a skip
7th.
week. We have a skip week in here, because March has 5 weeks in it. So it's, the next meeting, scheduled meeting is April 7th.
Does anyone want to second that motion?
I didn't pick up on that, so it's a motion to defer.
To April 7th to allow a report on water contamination.
I guess I got a
Question,
question.
Mr. Warren.
Question is, what are we gonna ask staff to determine?
How the,
At issue would be if there's any risk of groundwater contamination from the use of the gun range and the resulting lead shot or any other materials that would be evident on the site.
I have not yet heard a second, so this motion haven't heard a second, so now I would call for a recommendation for action or discussion.
Move to approve as presented.
I have a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
I have a motion to approve as presented and a second. Any discussion? I would like to ask if the operating hours could be at least that part specified. I heard them say they plan to operate after 8:30 and then up to 30 minutes before sunset, which was within the parameters suggested, but it feels like there should be some guidance there for sure. Would you accept a time specification for operation?
If we nail down what we're saying. Leave it
Right,
8 in the morning till
8 a.m. till,
a half hour before dusk.
yes, 8 a.m. till a half hour before dusk,
Is that acceptable to the applicant?
or sunset would be the time that could be specified.
And that is for shooting, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So is it 30 minutes prior to dusk or 30 minutes prior to sunset?
I think it needs to be prior to sunset because that's the factual time. Does the second
I would
accept?
accept that.
Yeah, I accept.
We have a motion and a second with the times specified for operation. Call for a vote.
Did you want to
Do
do
we
a roll
want to do a
call?
roll call for
Probably.
this, I believe? You proceed with the roll call for the vote, Scott.
Sure thing. Bill Johnson is absent. Fox?
No?
McKay?
Yes.
Green is absent. Jewell?
Yes.
Blick? Josh Blick?
Made the motion. Yes, I just wanted to verify who made the motion in a second, because I said it, but I think I was muted.
Whose motion was by Green, second by
Warren.
Foster? Oh,
Warren and
sorry.
Foster.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Or I'm sorry, Warren. You have a green shirt on. How am I supposed to remember your name is Warren? Motion by Warren, second by Foster. And Mr. Blick, your vote was?
Yes.
Okay.
Nix?
Yes.
Foster?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Miles is absent. Hartman is absent. Florence?
Yes.
Cunningham?
No.
So I have 2 noes. 8 yes. 4 absent.
And as the applicant does want to be a good neighbor, can we hook them up with the groundwater experts to make sure they know exactly the protocol?
Yeah, we will follow up with County Environmental Health, and we will forward the results, let the applicant know what we hear back, and we'll also have that information in time for the BOCC meeting, would be my intent.
Great, thank you. And thanks to you who came to present testimony. Item number 4.4, zoning case 2022-00010, This is zone change from office warehouse to two-family residential, south of Hydraulic and a quarter mile east of 55th Street.
Yes, good afternoon again, Philip Zievenbergen. For the record, Zone 2210, the applicant is requesting a zone change from office warehouse to two-family TF3 to permit duplex development. Property is located, as you can see, on the west side of South Hydraulic, within a half-mile north of East 55th Street South. It is currently vacant, but if you go to the aerial, the property was once part of a much larger nursery and garden center that you can see kind of the remnants of to the south. Currently, the property to the south is zoned PUD, which allows commercial and office warehouse uses. The only active use on that property to the south is a laundromat. This is a now separate tax parcel. It is zoned office warehouse. They're down zoning it considerably to TF3 for duplex development. Do you want to go to the exhibit, the site plan? The applicant is, it is subject to a replat. They're looking to plat 2 street right-of-way and develop 8 duplexes for a total of 16 dwelling units. You can see this would be where Hydraulic is. You would have a street. It's kind of oriented sideways compared to what the aerial. So north is to the right. So you would drive in off of Hydraulic, and it would be a stub end street, and there would likely be a hammerhead required at the time of platting or something like that. But all of that, you know, street rights of way widths and hammerheads and fire access and all that is taken care of at the time of platting. And then they would have another offshoot street this direction to provide access to the other property. If you go back to the aerial, property to the north is single-family residential with single-family residential properties, as is property to the west, as you can see. I mentioned previously that the property to the south is zone PUD and has commercial office, personal care and improvement services, indoor recreation, retail, restaurant, and outdoor garden uses as well, or greenhouse uses. Property to the east across Hydraulic is zone single-family residential with single-family homes around 53rd Street, and then south of that, this is MH zoning with a manufactured home park. The property does not require any screening from the TF3 to the SF5. They would just have to adhere to all the development standards within TF3. The property is platted, and there was a BZA in 91 that approved a parking reduction for the nursery center, but a lot of that really is a moot point at this point since the nursery center doesn't exist anymore. And they're looking to replat the property to get the other rights of way in there. According to the comprehensive plan, the community investments plan identifies the property as appropriate for residential development. This being a little bit higher intensity than single-family residential, the comprehensive plan actually calls for a little bit higher density residential as a buffer between higher commercial intensity and lower intensity residential uses. So this can actually act as a buffer to some of the single-family residential properties. This is also located in the South Wichita-Hayesville area plan. And goal 4 of that plan identifies the need to promote the development and revitalization of the housing and neighborhoods within the plan area. And an objective within that says to enhance and improve the area's housing opportunities and support the growth and development of the area. So we find that it's in conformance with that plan as well. I have not heard any public comments on this. This went to DAB 3 on March 2nd, and they approved it 901, the abstention being Commissioner Miles, so that she generally abstains from the planning votes. So in essence, they had a unanimous vote because of her abstention. There was no public comment at the DAB meeting either, and I can stand for any questions.
Parking, the streets are platted at the time of platting, so we don't govern that.
Nope.
But generally there's
The parking standard for duplexes is 1 per unit.
per unit.
Correct. So
And
they
that's
would
within the lot.
right,
for
off-street
the
parking
off-street.
requirement, and that can be met inside of a garage. So it can either be, if a garage is present, a off-street parking requirement can be counted inside of a garage.
And these
Or
are
it can be, or they would likely have driveways off of the streets to the properties anyway. And so either way, it's one per dwelling, so they would be looking at an off-street parking requirement of 16.
And the streets to nowhere with a hammerhead, you can navigate that to get back
Right,
out of nowhere.
likely at the time of platting, fire would most likely require some sort of hammerhead for their rigs to be able to turn around should they need to get in there to fight a fire and have to get back out. So again, that was not a plat they were seeing, that was just kind of a schematic to show the general layout. A lot of the details about the street layout and easements and all of that stuff will be determined at the time of the replat.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission on this case? Anyone in chambers have questions? Anyone virtually have questions?
I guess, do we want to hear from the applicant since we heard this?
Applicant, is the applicant present?
Agent for the applicant is here.
Thank you. Again, forgiveness for my less than stellar checklist here.
Kirk Miller, K.E. Miller Engineering, I'm the agent, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I think Philip just did, Kirk.
Okay.
Anything? Yeah. Yay for more housing. Thank you.
Okay.
Do you agree with the,
Yeah, we're fine with staff comments.
And
Recommendations.
who wanted to hear this?
Joe?
Yeah, who wanted to hear it?
I did because I forgot streets are by the city, but it gave people a restroom break. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Go, Chip.
Could I have a recommendation from the commission, please?
I'd like to move to approve per staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Foster, second from Mr. McKay or Mr. McKay. All in favor, please signify by aye.
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 Thank you. Motion passes. And that brings us to zoning case 2022-00011, request for multifamily residential from a TF3.
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. This is Matt Williams for planning staff. Zone 2022, number 11, is a request for the rezoning of a property from TF3 two-family to to B multifamily residential. The subject site is currently vacant, but the applicant is in the process of developing the property with 2 duplexes. The applicant's site plan depicts one of the duplexes on the site that would be located on the corner of the property. One reason the applicant has requested this B zoning is due to the street side setback. In the B district, the street side setback is 5 feet as opposed to 15 feet in the TF3 zoning district. The smaller setback will allow the applicant to place 2 duplexes on the subject property. I will note that the subject property is about twice the size of the adjacent properties around there, which are also zoned TF3. The context of the surrounding properties includes single and two-family homes with garages that are located either in line with or behind the primary structure. Staff recommends that the duplexes conform to the Wichita Places for People design guidelines, which are included in your staff report. There are multiple properties zoned B multifamily in the area, including on the block to the east and on the block to the west. The requested zone change is in conformance with our adopted plans and policies. Staff is recommending approval of the request with the protective overlay as follows. Number 1, the zoning lot shall be limited to a maximum of 2 duplexes, a total of 4 dwelling units. And number 2, the uses shall be limited to those found in the TF3 two-family zoning district. Staff is also recommending the duplex conform to the Wichita Places for People design recommendations. Although this is only a recommendation, we have not placed this in the protective overlay, making it a requirement at this time. The duplex in the applicant's site plan would not meet these design guidelines. I think that's important to note. The design guidelines include details on where the garage can be located, the amount of window transparency, and other items. The DAB heard this case on March 7th. They recommended approval with the protective overlay, and they did add the design guidelines as a requirement within the protective overlay. I have not heard any neighbors or any other issues with the case from any of the public. I'd be happy to go through some of these photos real quick. So actually, go back to that site plan real quick. So this would show the duplex located on the corner. The design guidelines and our recommendation talk about the garage face being less than 50% of the front elevation. As you can see, this has the garage face more than twice the front of that home elevation. You can tell with it sticking out there. Also, we have a requirement in there that the garage doesn't stick out more than 5 feet, I believe, from the rest of the primary structure, and you can see there that it sticks out quite a bit. Next photo. Here's the property right now. You can see on the north side of the property that they have started the development of that duplex. This was taken a couple weeks ago, so I'm not sure the status of that right now. Next photo. This is the property just north of the site. Next slide. Across the street to the east. Next slide. And this is the property to the south. I believe that's all the photos. All right, I'd be happy to answer any questions on this case.
Any questions for Matt at this time? How can they be building already if we don't even have this zoning case approved?
The site is zoned TF3 and they're...
Yeah, okay. So they could put the first one there. They just can't add the second until the zoning case is approved.
Correct, yeah, especially with that street side setback being so much greater.
And so the first, if it wasn't laid out to meet the design guidelines, then...
I think that would probably be a good question for the applicant.
Okay, all right. Can we
I'm
have
here and I can speak.
the applicant, please? Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 10 minutes.
Philip Rufo, 829 North Nims. Yeah, the reason one's already being constructed is because it was already zoned TF3 with no protective overlays to begin with, and it fit within the parameters of your setbacks. The only reason I need it zoned B is to eliminate the side setback. That's it. Other than that, I was told that protective overlays weren't being recommended since June of last year. This already didn't have it, so wanting it B just for the side setback is all I need. The duplex going next to it is already what was shown on the site plan and was already approved. So, you know, that's where I'm at with all this at the moment.
So your design plan has the large garage as the front face to, is that Grove?
Sure. Off parking, nice garage parking, you know.
Have you seen any house in the area that looks like that?
Yeah, I just built on 18th and Madison, which stone's throw away from here. I can actually share my screen and show that to you. There's about, I don't know, 500 of these scattered all over Wichita because this plan isn't anything new to Wichita. So,
any questions for the applicant?
I'd just like to clarify, so you have no intentions of meeting the design guidelines? Is that basically what you're telling us, that you're going ahead and using for both units the plan that is shown on our sketch site plan, or the house plan sketch we received?
I intend to add some more transparency to the front entrance as far as a window goes. As far as the garages, I mean, obviously you saw from those pictures, there are no garages. So off-street parking, I figured, is crucial. And so to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish, kind of have to have, with how narrow these lots are, kind of have to have it set up that way. It's the most feasible design, and the driveways themselves are at least 25 feet. As far as the actual percentage of the garage is taking up the actual facade, it's barely 50%. And I mean, I'm gonna meet all the other guidelines.
Is it two-story?
No,
Is it
no, it's
looks,
barely 20 feet tall total.
is there any way that you could do a garage access from the alley side, since you're the first lot in from the street?
Alley access to a garage and back?
Never
Yeah.
thought of that, but if I do that, that then the back of the house is going to be facing Grove to Main Street. I'm not really sure you guys want that.
No,
No, I mean, just have the garage on the
redesign.
back. Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms.
Yeah,
Foster.
you're talking about parking in the back and walking through the back to get to the front. I haven't designed anything like that. I do know they exist. And I know other builders that have put those in. For the sake of uniformity, I was just going to put the same thing next to it and just maybe do a different color to, you know, change the elevation above the garage, maybe do a double gable with an eyebrow on one and hit pitch the other. So I'm trying to change them up a little bit, but other than that, seems like the main concerns are the garages and the transparency in the front entrances. I mean, I just don't have any other way to shrink the garages.
The length of the bullnose that was another recommendation for a shorter bullnose. Is there a way to accommodate that by building back onto the lot deeper?
I mean, this fits. I mean, this is the maximum size of a building you can pretty much put on these lots as far as setbacks go. And it wouldn't even work because of the side setback. So considering there's one already next to it and I already didn't have protective overlays on it, I'm not really sure, other than that side setback would.
I have a question.
You know, I'm already building one that didn't have any of these issues next to it, just because I want to rezone it B, so I can have a side setback. We're gonna add them back in, even though I was told that they're not doing that anymore. The recommendations, of course, but not requirements.
Mr. Florence, you had a question?
I mean,
Yeah, I see a,
in the area, so.
I see a singular driveway. How will, if you build the other one, how will it access to the street?
What are you talking about? You're talking about that driveway that's there now?
I see it, yes, and you start talking about putting another unit
That's
there.
all coming out. All that gets removed, and we put 2 new driveways in from the street. That little thing that's there is coming out.
And will you replace the sidewalk?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
I don't know if
Part of
that's in
it.
the recommendations.
I mean,
Other
I'd do
questions
that.
for the applicant?
no
I'm sorry,
problem.
other questions for the applicant?
Well, would that pass the code as far as how close driveways can be? Because we're talking about a singular lot. We're not talking about 2 separate lots.
The driveways are, I mean, with my side setbacks plus my garages, the driveways are like 18 feet away from each other.
And the driveways will be approved in the plating process. Is that accurate, Scott?
I would say that, you know, if you look at the rest of the neighborhood around there, this lot is twice as large as those, and those, so each of those is made up of 2 lots with 2 separate driveways. I don't think it should be an issue.
Okay.
But we can definitely look into that.
Okay.
Just to double check.
Any other questions for the applicant? What is yes? Anybody in the audience who would like to speak to this case? Anyone virtual like to speak to this case? What's the pleasure of the board?
Recommend approval per staff comments.
I'll second it.
We have a recommendation for approval per staff comments with a second. Does that include the recommendations for design requirements then?
That does not.
That does not, okay. Motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay.
Yay.
Thank you. Case number
Yay for housing.
4.6. Zoning case 2022-00013 for an amendment to a protective overlay in a general commercial area. Philip?
Good afternoon, Philip Zievenbergen for the record. Zone 2213 is a request to amend protective overlay number 230 to allow vehicle and equipment sales on a property zone general commercial. You can see here it's on the north side of East 31st Street South, just east of K15 in southeast Wichita, located at 2826 East 31st Street South. The site has been historically used for vehicle repair general, which is not just a mechanic shop. Vehicle repair general allows body work, painting, fender work. It's the next step above just a mechanic shop and is not permitted unless it's in general commercial, unlike a mechanic shop can be permitted in limited commercial. Per the Unified Zoning Code, vehicle and equipment sales is permitted by right in general commercial, but the PEO restricts the uses on the property to those permitted in limited commercial except for the vehicle repair general. So they restricted the uses down to limited commercial except for the one use permitted in general commercial. And basically what they're asking for is permitting two uses to be permitted by right in general commercial. The primary use of the property for vehicle repair general is going to cease. They want to switch the primary use to being vehicle sales and then just be able to use the existing shop for ancillary maintenance of those vehicles. The PO applies to the whole property. If you go to the aerial image, there is an additional building on the site that's an appliance retailer. That's this building right here. This is the building that will be associated with the vehicle sales. One of staff's recommendations is to have a site plan be submitted for review and approval prior to the commencement of operation. If this had been a conditional use, a site plan would have been required, but the fact that they're just amending a protective overlay, that was not required in the application. But knowing there's things to look at regarding, are there going to be buffers installed to ensure vehicles don't project over into the right-of-way? Will the off-street parking requirement be met? Where is the customer and employee parking versus where's the display parking? Things like that, very normal things that we usually do a site plan review for vehicle sales. We would like that, have the opportunity to do that. So our recommendation includes an additional provision to the protective overlay requiring the site plan to be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to the commencement of operation of vehicle sales. Property to the north behind it is single-family residential with single-family homes. Property to the east is zoned office, warehouse, and limited commercial, and is the warehouse building in the back is like an event center, supply store, and a warehouse storage, and then this building closer to 31st Street is a vet clinic. Property to the west is zoned general commercial within the PO, and it's the appliance retail. If you go further to the west, this property is undeveloped, and that's zoned limited commercial. Property to the south is zoned limited commercial, and it's a Quick Trip, and this is an RV park just east of Quick Trip. There are two existing car lots on East 31st Street. One of them is right here, right off of K15 that is Volusia. And then the other one's not shown in the aerial, but it's at 31st and Hillside on the northeast corner. And that was actually a fairly recent case within the last year. I think it was a 2020 conditional use case for the northeast corner of 31st and Hillside. Vehicle and equipment sales in general commercial isn't subject to supplementary use regulations in the zoning code. However, since the protective overlay restricts the property to limited commercial uses, staff felt it was reasonable to apply the requirement of the supplemental use regulations for vehicle and equipment sales in limited commercial. I'm not going to go through those are in your staff report, but just it is part of our recommendation that those are added to the requirement for the operation of this site. The community investments plan identifies the areas appropriate for industrial uses. So we find that is in conformance to that, since vehicle and equipment sales is not an industrial use, it's less intensive than industrial uses. The Wichita Places for People plan, strategy number 6 encourages infill development that is contextual to the environment. It was vehicle repair general. You have car sales over here. You have warehouse uses. You have an RV park and a convenience store with a gas station. A lot of very auto-oriented type of thing. So we find that's in conformance with strategy number 6. This is an area of opportunity that requires public and private investments for reinvigorating the area. And this would provide an opportunity for private investment in the area. Staff is recommending approval, subject to the revised language for the protective overlay that is in your staff report. Again, I'll just review that very generally here. We are changing provision number 1 to allow for vehicle and equipment sales to be a permitted use. We are requiring a site plan to be produced and reviewed by staff before the commencement of operation. Item number 4 is the inclusion of the supplemental use regulations that would govern vehicle sales and limited commercial zoning that they would need to adhere to. I have not heard any public comment regarding this case. It did go before DAB 3 on March 2nd. They voted to approve it 5-4 to 1. The abstention was Commissioner Miles. So they were a split vote. Comments at the DAB, again, there was no public comment at the DAB. In the discussion, one of the gentlemen who made the motion for approval says that, pretty much as far as he can remember, the corner of K15 and 31st has been something related to like auto sales or auto repair, and this, in his mind, fit very contextually as just kind of a normal type of use for this area. Again, it was a split vote, 5-4. There really wasn't a lot of discussion as to why people voted against it. They just voted against it and they kind of moved on. So there really wasn't a lively discussion. It's like they took his motion and they voted and then they moved on. We can go through the site pictures. You want to jump to that point. This is looking straight out on the property. This is that appliance retail center. This is the building that's associated with the vehicle sales and their portion of the parking lot. Again, the whole property is under the same ownership. So when it comes to parking requirement, they just need to ensure that the retail store and the vehicles and equipment sales both continue to meet their off-street parking requirement, and that's going to have a limitation on the number of vehicles they can display. Without a site plan, we really can't know where that's going to be at, but they cannot use off-street parking requirement spaces for the display of vehicles. Next picture. This is looking to the northeast. This is the vet clinic on the north side of 31st Street. Next picture. This is looking to the southeast. This is that RV park that's east of Quick Trip. Next picture. This is looking south at the Quick Trip. Next picture. This is looking to the northwest. That's the appliance retail store and property. This is the undeveloped piece of property, and then the property over here is the vehicle and equipment sales that's on K15. Next picture. And we're back to the aerial, and I can stand for any questions.
Any questions for Philip at this point? If not, we'll call the applicant agent forward.
I believe he was joining us online. Mr.
online?
Hecox, are you still online with us?
Applicant or agent, is that you? Right here.
Oh,
They're here.
There we go. Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Ah, yes.
Okay.
Which is the applicant, Steve?
Right. They have a combined 10 minutes, so they just need
Okay.
to choose who's
10 minutes for all of you. So we have
So you have to
Mr.
just-
Hecox, if that's how we say it on the line. Will you give us your name and address, and then we'll proceed to name and address of the persons who are with us.
Okay, yes, Stephen Hecox, 2822 East 31st Street South.
Okay. And your names and address, please.
Habib Nasiri, 2826 East 31st South.
Thank you. And
My name is Margarita, and he's my uncle. I'm helping him with the preparation of the documents for this.
Okay. Thank you. Do you want to begin then, Mr. Hecox?
Yes, I am the owner of the property, and I have had the ownership of the property for 10 years. And in the past, we have leased the space that Habib would like to sell cars at to repair shops. And in comparison to what Habib offers, being a car dealer, compared to repair, in the past, the front lot where he would display cars has been full of junk cars, and very much an eyesore to anybody that is in the area. So my recommendation is that he be allowed to do this, because he'll be displaying cars that are refurbished for sale, and it improves the appearance of the whole area. So my opinion is that he should be certainly allowed to do this from that perspective.
Mr. Habib, do you want to speak about your plans for this property?
Very good.
So again, my name is Margarita. Thank you for allowing us to present it. This is my first time, just like yours. Well, so Uncle Habib, my uncle, it's been his dream to extend to a dealership. He has had businesses prior to this, but this time he's serious about expanding and getting this done right. We have come across this issue fairly recently. At first, we were told by the zoning department that we were good to go and we could just go ahead and start selling vehicles. But we have consulted with the inspector, Miss Tina Henry, and she said we were not allowed to proceed unless we have had this PO or protective overlay amended. So practically here we are. We're just hoping this will be approved and we don't see anybody protesting or any kind of issues arousing from us going ahead and getting this done.
Any questions for the applicant? Do you agree with the staff comments that were presented for the things you'd have to comply with, lighting and signage, et cetera?
Correct. I don't see
And the
it
number
being
of
a problem.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Do we have anybody in chambers who wants to speak on this item? Your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Shala Perez, and I am a community advocate. I've known this family for a number of years now, I think going on maybe 15 years, if I'm correct, maybe longer. He did reach out to me to help him. He did have a shop around the corner that is on your map as the one closer to K-15 at the intersection. So he was co-located behind that shop and wanted to have his own place on his own, and so he moved just around the corner. I did call on his behalf and speak with zoning to make sure everything was okay, and they didn't realize there was that protective overlay. So he did, make the move, invest quite a bit of money into getting this started, and then when he went to apply for his dealership license, found out that there was the protective overlay. So he's been really trying to work with everybody to make sure that this gets handled correctly, and I know him, and I will do my best to help him and make sure that he conforms to all your requirements and gets everything done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Are there any persons virtually who would like to speak on this case? Hearing none, what's the pleasure of the board?
Move to approve.
We have a motion from Mr. Warren to approve, second by Mr. McKay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
You've been approved. Thank you for following the rules. We appreciate that. Good luck with your business.
Thank you very much.
Okay, very good.
There is no meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals for lack of items. Therefore, if there's no other business, I say this meeting's adjourned.